Hey guys! You might have heard the term de-dollarization popping up on your feeds lately. De-dollarization is like a buzzword that has been making its rounds on social media in 2023 and causing quite a stir. But what exactly is de-dollarization all about, and what does it mean for Africa? In this video we delve into these questions. In less than the time it takes to eat a packet of plantain chips, you will know all the key points about this important topic. But before we dive in, please remember to like this video and to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hello and welcome. Can you start by quickly explaining to us what de-dollarization is all about and why we are hearing so much about it lately?
Sure. De-dollarization refers to the process of reducing the use of the US dollar in international trade, with the aim of reducing dependence on the US dollar as a reserve currency. Many countries, especially those in the global south, are talking about it because they are worried about the negative effects of US monetary policy, which can cause inflation, capital outflows, volatility in exchange rate, and in some cases, vulnerability to economic sanctions.
Why is this important for Africa?
It is very important because right now, the continent is made up of 54 weak sovereign states that rely heavily on foreign currencies to trade with one another. This makes it very expensive. These currencies are also gateways for foreign institutions to get involved in domestic policy that would be better handled by Africa's own governments or government. A very good person to listen to on this issue would be Professor PLO Lumumba. He is one of the most outspoken voices of today, calling on African governments to realize the dream of unified currencies for Africa. In a speech at the 2018 African Transformation Forum in Ghana, Professor Lumumba stated that Africa needs a single currency. We cannot continue to use the currencies of other countries to transact our business. It is time we had our own currency.
What are the latest advances toward de-dollarization in Africa?
There have been some important moves recently, mainly in response to economic instabilities linked to worsening exchange rates for African currencies, especially against the dollar. Major examples include Ghana, which in November 2022 announced intentions to use its gold reserves to exchange for oil imports. There is also Kenya. In March 2023, they announced proposals to pay for oil imports using their own currency, the Kenyan shilling.
Wow! Those are some dramatic developments. But ideas of de-dollarization in Africa are not new, are they?
These issues are definitely not new to Africa. In fact, these ideas date back to the 1920s when Jamaican activist Marcus Garvey proposed the creation of a Pan-African currency called the Negro Unit. He proposed that this currency would be backed by the economic resources and the labor of all people of African descent around the world. Another example comes from 1963, when Ghana's President Kwame Nkrumah called for continental and African single currency in his book, Africa Must Unite. While these Pan-African ideas have persisted, it's only really now that the process of monetary union and de-dollarization are being realized.
Okay, it certainly has been a long time in coming. What are some of the challenges that have prevented the realization of a unified currency for Africa up till now?
There have been several attempts at creating regional or continental single currencies in the past. One example is the ECO, a common currency for the West African Community, ECOWAS countries. This was first proposed in the year 2000 by the West African Monetary Zone, WAMZ. Another example is the East African shilling for the countries that make up the East African Community, EAC, proposed back in 2012. These are not the only attempts, but they provide good examples. In each case, obstacles have hindered or stalled implementation, such as economic disparities between countries, political instability in some countries, differing monetary policies among countries, lack of financial infrastructure in some countries, and lack of political will.
I see. So, if it is so difficult, why do African nations keep working on policies to bring about monetary integration?
African nations see this issue as paramount because they understand that monetary union and thus de-dollarization will significantly boost economic growth for the continent. This is what is needed to facilitate the movement of people, goods, and services across the continent. It is also essential because greater economic integration and cooperation among countries will improve the standing of Africa on the world stage.
So, do you think African countries are actively seeking to challenge the US dollar as the world's reserve currency?
No, I wouldn't say that has been the primary agenda for most of Africa. They are most concerned about lifting their people out of poverty and economic prosperity for all. What I would say though, is that once they do put single currency policies into action in the interest of their own economies, that in itself will actually have the trigger effect of de-dollarization and reducing the dollar's power in Africa.
Yes, that makes sense. But what about President Gaddafi, the former leader of Libya? Wasn't his idea to challenge the dollar as the world's reserve currency?
Gaddafi certainly did have ambitions of directly challenging the US dollar and other Western currencies. He had a plan for a single currency for Africa which he called the African gold dinar that would be backed by the continent's gold reserves. His ideas are quite similar to those being discussed by many global South countries today, which involve ideas of a new gold-backed reserve currency, separate from the US dollar, to serve what is being called a multipolar world. These ideas are almost mainstream now, but in 2009 when Gaddafi first proposed his African gold dinar, it was still a politically explosive idea, and many Western countries, particularly the US and France, were strongly opposed to it.
I see. So where is Africa now? Has the continent moved forward in the quest for a single currency?
Sure it has. The big hope for Africa now is the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, which came into effect on January 1, 2021. Through this agreement, Africa will have a single market for goods and services and will ultimately remove all internal trade barriers. This will promote easy intra-African movement and trade. One of the objectives of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is to establish a common African currency, which will definitely reduce dependency on other currencies and so accelerate the process of de-dollarization in Africa.
That sounds good.
It is a very exciting time for Africa.
So there you have it, guys. De-dollarization is not just a buzzword, it is an idea that has been around for decades in Africa. The hope is that the African Continental Free Trade Area will be a catalyst for the realization of a unified currency for the continent, which could greatly benefit Africa's economic growth and standing on the global stage. We hope this video has been helpful. Thank you for watching.